In the days and weeks that followed the flood and the cleanup, we continue to ask ourselves why the Susquehanna has such a history of overflowing its banks.
Right, and what could be done to prevent future disasters? Matt Markham spoke to some of the experts, including the Susquehanna River Basin Commission.
This day's weather was all too similar to September 8. While the cleanup continues and will for some time, some relief comes in the river's much lower level.
After every flood event, we reassess the system we have. We go back and check to make sure it is stable.
And that's what the DEC is trying to figure out with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Susquehanna River Basin Commission now. The SRBC also needs to reevaluate its river gauges stressed like the flood walls.
We had more gauges installed in the system that were able to help with advanced lead time.
Did overtop the structures in certain places, but they held structurally, and now we're in the business of going back to assess their health at this point. They were stressed in this storm.
The flood walls, despite being overtopped, provided a lot of protection and prevented the damage from being much worse.
Together with the levee system around some of the adjoining communities, saved a lot of damage. There's a lot of damage there now, but fortunately those walls did save much more damage.
And so did the river monitors, which provided the SRBC with a rich resource for river level forecasting. Funding from the government has dried up for more, but the agency will look for other funds, and its partners are starting to think about future flood events.
We'll look at other means. Can we do more? Can we do better to prevent more flooding?
The one thing no one can control is the weather.
People say the 100-year storm, but that doesn't mean it can't happen 2 years in a row.
The likelihood of this flood was just 1%, but after 2006, we learned a little more, and we were better prepared for 2011. A majority of the Susquehanna River Basin's residents live in flood-prone areas, and that's what the scientists who plan for flooding say even if we can't remember the floods of this scale ever in our lives. That was much the case in the first ward. Some of that area is considered under FEMA's newly proposed 100-year floodplain, and you can see on this map the area that's shaded in blue is pretty much the area between Front and McGatt Street. That's now much larger than the original floodplain, which you can see is the area that's shaded in gray there by the Shenango River. There was some criticism from neighbors and lawmakers when FEMA drafted these maps. They said homeowners were safe in many of the expanded zones and the insurance cost was just too much. But after this flooding, are they saying the same thing?
There's no creeks, there's nothing around here.
Neighbors continue to clean up in the first ward here on Colfax Avenue, far beyond the new flood map's limits. Perhaps a showing of how right the new plans may be.
Our maps are not perfect. We don't claim them to be perfect, but in this case, they appear to have identified many of the areas that now have been impacted quite well.
FEMA also considered the levee system in its models. They were overtopped in places. Stormwater also caused some flooding.
Many instances that backflow, if it's been identified previously, will be incorporated into the model.
Senator Chuck Schumer was critical of the original proposal, which added 6,500 homes.
The maps have to constantly be updated. The maps have to constantly be revised. You shouldn't have areas in there that are not susceptible to flooding.
Broome County says it needs time to discuss any further mitigation efforts here, like raising the flood wall height. If the USGS comes back saying this was a 500-year flood rather than a 100-year flood, there's really only so much preparation anyone can do for something of that scale. By the way, these new flood maps are not applicable to insurance rates just yet. Candace.
Now, what can be done from here may also be the subject of new proposals as well as some debate.
All right, and so when we come back, we will talk with some of your local leaders in a roundtable discussion.